This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bear Boat Alaska, up your DIY hunting game with one of their 37-foot adventure yachts. You and 5 of your friends can hunt, fish, set crab pots, shrimp pots, and take DIY to the next level. Bear Boat Alaska is locally owned by a Ketchikan resident who lives here year-round. Call Larry at 907-617-4542 or go to bearboatalaska.com. That's B-A-R-E boatalaska.com and tell Larry you heard about it on this podcast. Will Collins back. Welcome back to the podcast.
Yay, thanks a lot, man. Glad to be here. I've been enjoying following your stuff and picking into your book as well. So good to talk to you guys.
Nice, thanks. So you just got back from the Yukon.
You bet, buddy. Yeah, it was a blast.
We previewed that. I think it was in May or June or something like that in the late spring. And now it's over. Are you kind of are you still on the high, or are you kind of like, oh man, it's over?
Oh, it's a little bit of a mix. Today was the first day back to real work after the trip, so settling in for sure. But it's a little bit of a mix. I'm still riding the high and still trying to plan future trips, so I still got a little sparkle in there.
Yeah, that's the worst when you head back to work or whatever, and you have this memory, but it's not really fading, I guess, but just that euphoria of doing something like that on that magnitude, and then you're going back to the regular life, and you're so excited you did it, and you're looking forward to the next trip, but sometimes the time in between can be a little tough.
Oh, you're totally right, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is that, as much as you never think it will, the memory fades almost instantaneously. Like it was an 8-day trip we did up on the Yukon River, backcountry canoe trip through my company, Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. And even on day 8, or day 7, we were going through the meals, going through our campsites, and it was even foggy then from 5 or 6 days prior. It was like, what did we have to eat? And I remember the couple main things, but not everything in between.
I know, it's crazy how that works, and you get day 2 and day 3 confused, and wait, which day had the worst mosquitoes, and yeah. Man, it's crazy. So kind of talk me maybe a little bit through the last minute preparations and some of the logistical things, then get into kind of the details of the trip itself.
Sure. So if you can, I'll start the other way around, if you don't mind. I'll go the details and then get into the preparation. So the details was a 8-day, 7 nights backcountry canoe trip on the Yukon River out of Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, Canada. And I had done the trip once before this section in 2018. I did the entire Yukon River, 2,000 plus miles from above, I guess technically it's south of Whitehorse where the river starts, all the way to the Bering Sea across the interior of Alaska. And on this trip, I was guiding it. So it was a hosted wilderness trip that I organized started with 5 of us. One guy had to back out last minute. So it ended up being 4 of us all together, 3 guys and myself. And we had known each other. We went to summer camp, funny enough, together 14 years ago. And hadn't seen each other since. And they all hopped on the trip, and it was an absolute blast. And the logistics, fairly simple, honestly. You fly into Whitehorse, the Yukon Territory, get off the airplane. We had a hotel the first night, and then there's an outfitter there that we use, Canoe People. So I organize and rent all the gear, most of the gear, not all the gear, maybe all the big stuff, canoes, cooking stuff. What else did I rent? A few other odds and ends group gear things from this outfitter. And then we push off from Whitehorse and say sayonara and see you 8 days later. And paddle through the wilderness of Yukon Territory. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. There's a lot of mining history in that area with Whitehorse, and is it Lake LaBarge? Is that the one that's right next there? Because that was in the cremation of Sam McGee, that Robert Service poem. Did you just kind of sit around for a few days and read Robert Service poetry before you got on the canoes?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought it up. That was one of the highlights of the trip, honestly. I had done the same thing when I was up there before, and I brought it up, and the guys just loved it, and I did too. Yeah, we did uh, readings from The Spell of the Yukon, Robert Service, pretty much every morning, especially Cremation of Sam McGee. And yeah, there's one that's still on the tip of my tongue, Rhyme of the Remittance Man. It opens up, there's a four-pronged buck a swinging in the shadow of my cabin, and it roamed the Velvet Valley till today. But I tracked it by the river, and I killed it on the mountain, and I've something along those. It's just, oh man, it's great. And yeah, that area is filled with gold mining, the Klondike Gold Rush, and that's kind of the theme, not theme, but the aura around the area is the
Yeah.
gold rush.
Yeah. It's pretty funny that, and I'm not sure where the line is, but sometimes it can be incredibly cliche to like read into the wild at the magic bus just because it's become such a ridiculous thing. But then other times, like if you're reading Russell Chatham and you are fishing the Russian River or the Smith River in Northern California, you're like, dude, it's right here. This here, this is it. Or some Mark Twain stuff in Calaveras County. Like sometimes you just feel that gravity. Like, dude, it was this. Jack London and some of those areas there.
Totally.
It's pretty cool to read that in those areas. Is there anywhere else that you've kind of been? I know kind of off topic a little bit here, but any other books that you kind of paired to a trip or thought, hey man, what's the local literature? And I'm going to kind of read this on the shore.
I have a little bit. I should be better. You mentioned Mark Twain on the Mississippi. That was a big one for me. Reading Life on the Mississippi, Huck Finn, all those ones, and stopping in Mark Twain's hometown. And now it's escaping me. What is his town? Regardless, it's on the Mississippi. So I also paddled the Mississippi, the entirety of the Mississippi in 2017. So reading that stuff along the river was amazing as well. And just thinking about him, like steamboating up and down the barges, up and down the river. Also, there's a music album. John Hartford, who's a bluegrass guy, has a great album called that is also escaping me, but it's all about steamboating and piloting the Mississippi, and that album paired great to the river too. But yeah,
sometimes that makes me a little bit sad because in reading or in listening, you see what's been lost since it was written. I went to Walden Pond and I thought, oh man, this is people swimming in it. I mean, you got 60, 70-year-old people who are out there swimming. And good on them. It's great, but it just, there's zero isolation, zero of that escape that Thoreau was looking for when he went out there. But of course, that's going to happen over 150 years or so. But yeah, you get reminded of the way the fishing was and that frontier spirit and that endurance is just the breed of person who existed back then and then what they were capable of compared to today. So it's awesome to read. It's awesome to pair that, but also some little bit of sadness comes with the fact that level of, I don't want to, freedom or independence or that lifestyle doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I think I would say two things to that. One is, I think there is still some of that if you go and search. I mean, you're up in that neck of the woods. There's some characters around you, I'm sure that, I mean, it's different, but there's a lot of people who don't want to be found and a lot of people who are just kind of quietly going about their way. I think it's still out there a little bit. And also it is a weird dichotomy of, being a writer or a podcaster or whatever, or a guide, and bringing people to these amazing places and showing people these amazing places and talking about these amazing places. I think we talked about this on the last one that we did, but yeah, it's just an interesting dichotomy because, Walden Pond, there probably wouldn't be a bunch of people swimming there right now. It may still be a nice little wilderness place if Thoreau had never written about it. Mm-hmm. But I still think we're better off for him having written about it,
Yeah, for sure. We romanticize, or I do. A lot of people do in the writing and podcasting realm. We romanticize that historical state, and we sometimes or often forget the reality of what it was to live back then. Hunters and anglers probably are the worst about this because we look back at, oh my gosh, hunting was so much better and the fishing was so much better and everything else. Well, yeah, you also had real teeth. You didn't have wooden teeth, and we weren't dying of tetanus. We weren't dying of, we had solutions for a whole bunch of illnesses and whatnot. So we take our recreational ideas about how amazing it would be to catch and fish, tons of fish, but you weren't doing that back then. You weren't, unless you were very, very wealthy, you weren't throwing fish back. You weren't sorting through elk just to shoot the biggest one so you could talk about it. And I would bet that some people that don't have or wouldn't have the social media dopamine dump might not be as interested in some of the backcountry hiking and hunting and stuff like that they do. So it is, and there's a whole part of the conversation there. So when I look back at some of the times I've been tempted to say that I was born in the wrong generation, I think, well, I'm probably not even hardcore enough to live back then, A, and then B, there's a lot of other things that come with living during that time.
Yeah, two more quick points on that. One is I found it fascinating tying it back to the Yukon, that when we were up there, we came back from we got a ride back from Carmax, which is the First Nations village we were picked up in and brought back to Whitehorse. And on the shuttle back, it was a really awesome First Nations gal who was driving us, and she was telling us all about the area and where she grew up. Her family grew up on Lake LaBarge there, and from the cremation of Sam McGee. Just stunningly beautiful area. Had fish camp that right at the outlet of LaBarge, where LaBarge is kind of like a lake in the middle of the Yukon. The Yukon flows into it and flows out of it. So right at the outlet there, her family had fish camp, and she was telling us all kinds of stories, but one of which was that many of the creeks in that area, she worked in the miners recorder office for the government in Whitehorse there, the capital of Yukon, she said, I forget how long, but for a long time. And there are still people like you and I out there living in these little trappers cabins and tiny little shacks during the summer, and just individuals panning for gold and making their living doing that.
That's awesome.
Living in the woods. She said if they take the gold out of Yukon, they would have to bring it into the mining recorder's office. So she would record all of the claims. And she said in particular, there was these two German guys who would just crush it every year and bring in like peanut butter jars full of gold, is what she said. So
that's wild.
Pretty wild. Yeah.
That is awesome.
And another little side note, and then we can move on, is that I've talked with a lot of folks on my podcast, the Buffalo Roamer Outdoors, who have done either paddled or walked the Lewis and Clark Trail. So basically the Missouri River, and then over to the Pacific Ocean. And that is a fascinating talk about like the historical context of being in the exact same place as Lewis and Clark, possibly even on the exact same day, 150 years, whatever it is, 200 years after them, and seeing like them write about the exact same landscape because they were so scientific with their recordings. Yeah. It's kind of neat to be able to trace that, and it's been cool to talk to people and their different perspectives about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, history aside, you guys got rolling there. What was that like?
Oh, it was amazing. So the first part of the river, it's really it's that glacial runoff, which maybe you're familiar with in different parts of Alaska. But it's like that turquoise, iridescent color river. Just amazing. And it was real high water this year. So when you walk up to the river for the first time as a group, you're a little, the blood starts flowing a little bit. You're like, woo, the water's moving. And yeah, it's a fairly large river, even right at the start. So we push off from the outfitter right in downtown Whitehorse, and we're off downriver, floating huge mountains all along. It was the forecast called for terrible weather the whole time. Ended up being nearly perfect. We had 1 day of rain out of the 8 days. And it was cool because we were kind of dodging different weather systems, with the skies and the lands being so big up there and the river moving quick. It was probably moving, I don't know, maybe 5 miles an hour or so, and without paddling. And so you can kind of chase and follow different weather systems. So you'll see like a storm coming from the mountain ridge over on the left-hand side, but you'll be flowing so fast you'll pass it, or you'll see one up ahead engulfing the river, and you enter the storm and it's raining everywhere. But when you're in the middle of it, you can see where it's sunny just around the next bend. Mm-hmm. So that's always kind of fun.
When we drove over the Yukon a couple of days ago, it's so wide and big that the current is almost imperceptible. And then you really look at it and you can see that it really, really moves. How is that for someone who has obviously been on the Mississippi, but you've also been on some faster water? Do you kind of like that, the pace of just being able to go 5 miles an hour if you don't do anything, just kind of keep things going down straight? Is that a nice pace to get into, or do you kind of get, hey, let's move it up a little bit because the weather, but also let's get to shore and hang out and eat a little bit?
I think both. I love like a fast moving river. I'm sorry here. Can you hear this beeping?
No.
Yeah. Did you say no?
Yeah, I can't hear it.
Okay, hang on 1 second.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Okay. I love the fast pace of the river. I think it's one of the things that make river trips awesome is that, there's typically not many portages unless you have to worry about a dam, and the Yukon, it's about as wild as a river as you can get in terms of that. There's one dam well above Whitehorse, and then it's free flowing all the way to the Bering Sea. So yeah, it's great just to be able to get on the water and float and be able to make miles. It's cool to be able to see different horizons and, see a point in the horizon that you'd like to get to. You make it there and then you pass it all in a day. Whereas backpacking or whatever it may be, it's just a little bit slower moving. So I think the speed of the river trips are awesome. Awesome. And you're right. It is kind of imperceptible about how fast or how quick it's moving, especially when it's that big. And every time you're on the water, you feel in total control in the boat. It's, never a worry at all. And then every time you get off the river and like pull into an eddy or take a step off the river and you look at the water, you're just like, wow, that river's cooking.
Yeah. So what was the canoe setup that you had? How many per canoe? What kind of canoes? All that.
So we ran 2 canoes, 2 Clipper fiberglass canoes, made in BC. and they're great boats. We had one of them was 18 and a half feet, and the other one was 17 or 16 and a half feet. And we had 4 people, so one person in each boat. And yeah, they worked great. We had one like blue barrel, blue food barrel full of food. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They're fairly popular in the canoeing world. And we had a cooler and one like mess kit, we called it, just like a bin filled with all of our pots and pans and such, like a big Tupperware type bin. And then all of our personal gear loaded into the boats, and that's what we lived with for 8 days.
Nice. What was the food?
Food was amazing. So we had just a quick rundown of the menu for dinners. We had burgers, steak. The first 2 nights we did pizza with brownies for dessert. We had South Indian fried rice, chicken fried rice.
Is this all like cooked from scratch-ish, or are you talking about unique flavors of freeze-dried meals?
It's cooked from scratch-ish.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you weren't adding water, making it sound really exotic.
No, it's not that far from that, but it's a step up from the freeze-dried stuff. It's basically just like the quick stuff from the grocery store. But yeah, I get all of it from the grocery store.
Gotcha.
With canoeing, you have a little more luxury than backpacking, where you can kind of bring some weight. So yeah, we did like fresh burgers and steaks the first 2 nights because we had the cooler, so we could eat some fresh meat. What else? We did the chicken fried rice. We had no bake cheesecake one night, which was delicious. We did chili with rice and cornbread in the Dutch oven.
Nice.
Cornbread was a hit. Yeah, all kinds of good stuff.
Nice. And then how long per day were you floating, paddling versus time on the beach?
We spent most of the day paddling. However, with it being longer days up there, we kind of had our days shifted back. So we would take pretty slow, easy mornings, couple cups of coffee, breakfast around the fire, pack up camp, read a couple Robert Service poems, pack up the boats, and typically we would float. There was a few different days where we did more or less, but generally speaking, you'd be on the water for 2 to 3 hours in the morning and then 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon. And that would kind of make up your day. Now, there was one day where we had a longer day. One of the campsites we wanted to take was occupied, which was the only time that happened. So we floated a little longer, but it was no big deal. Made some miles, and yeah. And then some days, one day, like the last day, we paddled 12 miles to our takeout on the last day. So,
Did you see many other people on the boat on the river?
Not many. No, we saw that group that had the campsite we wanted, and we saw maybe 3 other groups. No real interaction other than just them kind of floating by.
Yeah. So they were recreational types.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Doing the same type thing as we were.
Yeah. At the crossing that we went over, there is a river camp type thing and 18 or so tables where you can eat at the cafe, and big old parking lot for boats and trailers and cars and whatnot, trucks. But it had kind of an old feeling to it, and the parking lot was somewhat empty. And this is kind of the type of year where there should be kings, there should be chum in the river, but because the runs have been so poor lately and they've had emergency shutdowns, the cafe had kind of an eerie feeling, just because it was. The people who worked there were awesome. There was a lady up front. There was a lady that was cooking. Food was excellent, but it just had this sort of kind of run down, the good times are over type feel to it, which was kind of sad. It was also, we were there at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, so it was pretty early.
I've been to that spot. I assume you're talking about on the Hall Road, where the pipeline crosses there. Yeah. I've had some funny times at that spot actually, but there's an interesting cat out there or at least there was when I was there, selling, all kinds of Alaska tourist stuff, furs and hides and stuff like that. He had some funny stories.
When were you there? Like what time of year?
So this was when I did the trip. I've been there twice. The one time I was there, it would have been in August or maybe no, it was July when I was in the Brooks Range, and then the more recent time would have been 2018, and that would have been probably late July.
And was it hopping both times, or was it kind of just?
It was the funniest thing, actually, the funniest dichotomy. The first time I was there, it was pretty hopping. It was like a truck, I would describe it as like a truck stop, like American burgers, and people kind of in and out, and great food. Kind of the last stop before Coldfoot, I believe. And the second time I was there in 2018, I was so pumped to get off of the river on the Yukon there, and get a burger and a beer and just gorge myself. And we got off, and I don't know if it's still this way, but they had switched it to like a Chinese restaurant.
No way. Really?
Yeah. Is it not that way anymore?
No, he had a slamming bacon standard American breakfast. Yeah.
Really? That is so funny because, when I was there in 2018, they changed it to a Chinese restaurant. The whole place was like full of noodles, like boxes of noodles that they were like storing. And they had said they switched it up because in the winter they had a booming Chinese tourist industry.
Yeah, for the Northern Lights.
For the Northern Lights.
Yeah. Huh.
But interesting to hear that apparently it switched back.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that and how far north some of those tourist buses went, but I guess it's somewhat further than the turnoff to Manly Hot Springs, but I think Chena Hot Springs has their big resort type thing, and Manly does too. But yeah, that was kind of interesting, kind of bizarre. I guess it makes sense on some level, but yeah, this place was playing old 80s and 90s country music, and the bacon was perfectly cooked, and there was eggs and grease. It was good.
Well, that's good to hear. Maybe they weren't quite getting the tourism boom they thought they might, but hopefully they're doing all right. But can't go wrong with eggs and bacon, right?
No, for sure. Absolutely not. Yeah, it's just a weird feeling, some of these spots along the way, and what keeps people there. It's so great that people are willing to provide that service for those of us who want to just kind of go through and pass through. And I think the temptation would be to compare and say, well, who would live here? Why would anyone live here? They must have nothing going on. Well, if they weren't here, man, you wouldn't be getting a burger. So, there should be some appreciation, but it does make you wonder and question, like, what is it like? And of all the options that are out there, because a lot of these people, they don't seem like they just never left. They chose this. And so you think, absolutely, man, what frame of reference is that? And like, where did they come from? And then how did they decide that this is where they wanted to stay? It's pretty interesting.
Some interesting stories, I'm sure. Everybody's got one, and those people probably have more interesting stories than most, I would guess.
Yeah. But there might be a shelf life on it. I wonder if some people are there for a little bit and run that, or it could be seasonal. But you never know. Kind of interesting. Were there any interesting towns along the float route that you were able to kind of stop off and get a little culture?
Yes, there was a few, actually. Most of them were like old historical sites preserved by the government, by the Canadian government. Most of them, kind of surrounded that Klondike Gold Rush era. So the coolest one was there's at Hootalinqua, which is the confluence of the Yukon and the Teslin River in Yukon Territory. There's like an old wooden stern wheeler. It's massive. And it's on an island in the river, and it was an old shipyard in like the mid to late 1800s, early 1900s, and they had beached this old sternwheeler. It's basically like a big John boat, like a skiff that you would run on the river today, but massive and all made out of wood. And yeah, they beached it. I guess it was kind of constructed poorly, and they beached it and used it, stripped it for parts until eventually, there was no more community or no more business there, and so there it sits basically in its entirety. It's pretty awesome.
What
you can see inside like the huge boiler and the huge wood rudders in the back. Pretty cool.
Wow. What other things along the way did you kind of see that were interesting, unique, or I'm sure you saw wildlife and whatnot too, but other relics that were pretty sweet?
A couple things, mostly as far as like, structures and such, old cabins, like old wood yard, stuff, basically all supporting that Klondike gold rush, bringing supplies, the industry around bringing supplies and all that stuff. A couple old trading posts, couple old native villages and stops that have since been abandoned, or fish camps. That stuff's all cool, but mostly the best part is just, the amazing scenery and the amazing wilderness. It's just, you really, really feel like you're out there, and it's massive mountains jetting right down into the river, which is awesome. The colors between like that iridescent blue-green color of the glacial runoff river compared to the like forest green of the mountains and like the granite all together, it just like flows together. A painter would have a heyday. And it's pretty spectacular wilderness.
What's kind of the difference, or is there a difference? You're in a different country, so there's different regulations and there's different, political, all that cultural differences, but you might not be able to access that because you're out in the water. Did it feel like it was rugged? Did it feel rural? Did it feel like something that would have been found in the United States, or was it like, oh, this is definitely Canada?
Well, I would say both. You fly through, you're in Canada, so you definitely know you're in Canada. It's funny, I forget, they're your neighbors to the east. For me, they're the neighbors to the north. And you forget because because they look like you and sound like you and are close, you forget that it is a different country. Things are done a little differently, and a lot of French influence in Whitehorse and in that area. A lot of French Quebec people there, as well as just French people. Also, like a lot of other kind of interesting cultural influences there. There's like a lot of Indian and so I want to say Somalian immigrants there as well. So that throws kind of a cool twist to it. Bunch of interesting Asian restaurants. But yeah, you definitely know you're in Canada. It's just slightly different. And also it's great though. Love it. And also, yeah, it's rugged. It's rugged as hell. It feels really wild when you're out there. There's only 2 real takeout points the whole 8 days. So if something were to happen, somebody's got to come from Whitehorse probably and either, jet boat downriver or come from Carmax, which is the takeout 200 miles away, and jet boat upriver. But even that would come from Whitehorse. So it feels like you're out there. Yeah, it's pretty raw and remote.
Yeah. I've driven through just the very southwest section of British Columbia, coming up from Washington and then going to Prince Rupert and putting my truck on a boat. So I've only been in a very small part of it, but 2 things that kind of stuck out to me as far as culture goes. You drive through these towns, they look like they could be in Alaska. They look like they could be in Washington. But one of the things was going into a Walmart and just how friendly and how clean everything was. And I thought, oh man, this is not the same stereotype. You're people of Walmart, Facebook page definitely doesn't have any pictures taken in Canada because it just seemed just so much different. The lady at the front seemed like she worked at a Hallmark. Hallmark is kind of that store of just friendly, wonderful people selling cards, and that's kind of how that lady treated her job at Walmart. So that was pretty interesting. And then at the campsites, they had was it maybe one loony. You could take a shower and everything was clean. And so it seemed like those parks and the campsites were maybe a little bit better taken care of, not only by the government but also by the users. It seems some of the unfortunate things that happen to a lot of the American places is that there's graffiti, there's drawings, there's just general stupidity and some trashiness. That doesn't say that it doesn't happen in Canada too, because people are people. But I think the sad reality is not enough people maybe to keep everything nice at a lot of our parks, camp sites and showers, and then also entitled users who kind of trash things.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment from my observations too. The people in Canada are super friendly. Super friendly and willing to help out. And B, all the amenities, super nice. We did, I think we ended up staying pretty much at all like marked campsites. Not marked as in, I don't know, it's not like a reservation type thing or anything like that, but it's just like there's a fire ring, maybe a picnic table, and possibly an outhouse, and or like a pit toilet or something. All the ones that had that type of amenity to it, were awesome and kept up well. And I agree. In fact, kind of a funny story. I'll make it quick, but there was a guy when we flew into Whitehorse. I didn't know how we were going to store our bags that we flew with. So I was trying to figure that out, and I found a random number online, called the guy because it had baggage somehow correlated to it. Called the guy and said, "Hey, I saw online that you handled luggage or baggage. We're looking for someplace to store our bags." And he's like, "Oh, I don't know how you got this number. There was a baggage store here that sold baggage about 20 years ago."
Ooh, wow.
He goes, but I have a cleaning shop in town, and no problem. I can help you out and store your bags. So the guy offers to help us store our bags just from a random number on the internet. Just a random guy in Whitehorse. I was like, I think I could help you out. No problem.
Yeah.
So funny.
That's another stereotype. It kind of works in Alaska too, where not everybody is, scraping for resources necessarily and always just looking out for themselves. In order to get through the winters in Alaska, you really have to look out for each other. So a lot of the rural communities are very, very friendly, and if you need something, they're willing to help, and they don't, sound put off or make you feel horrible for having to ask for help. People often go out of their ways to help people because they know at some point they're going to need that too. There's not that sort of desperation. I know that exists in the lower 48 and some of the smaller communities too, and even in your friend groups and whatnot, but it seems to be very prominent in Canada as well as in smaller American or Alaskan cities. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And in 2018, when I was farther down the Yukon into Alaska, farther downriver than I was on this past trip just a few days ago in Yukon territory, we stopped into so many villages along the river, and the people were all overwhelmingly welcoming, and most of the times we were looking for something, whether it be like coffee. A couple times we stopped into villages for coffee, and multiple people helped us out. Random other odds and ends things. It was totally. I completely agree. Yeah, and they don't oftentimes. Same with the Whitehorse guy as well. They weren't even. They're not looking to necessarily trade or take something from you. They're just looking to help out.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. It's the mark of a healthy, nice community, but at the same time, there's definitely an underbelly, and I'm sure that there's plenty of people who are willing to curse the visitors and the tourists and the unprepared people. They just don't necessarily put themselves in a position where they might interact with those people and then be put in a position where they would help. So.
Yeah, exactly. And also you can kind of generally, at least I think, not always, oftentimes, sometimes you get taken advantage of, but you can usually tell, like, the people who are, for lack of a better term, the underbelly, or people who are kind of sketchy. You can usually get a pretty good feel for it quickly. And yeah, avoid them.
Yeah. So rest of the float, how was in general? What are some of the highlights? What were you kind of broke down the food and the whatnot? But what were some of the highlights of the trip?
Altogether, just the wilderness. We had one campsite that was awesome. It was on a place called Walsh Creek, where we were overlooking like a tributary where a good-sized creek flowed into the Yukon. We were right at the point there, and had an awesome fire and a delicious meal, and kind of stood and just got to overlook that like 180-degree water with the tributary flowing into the main branch. That was awesome. Mostly just the crew, the group of guys that was all out there. Everybody just meshed super well. We're just telling stories and shooting the breeze in the boats all day long, getting around the campfire at night. Everybody doing their task to contribute, whether it's getting firewood, sawing firewood, cooking dishes, just everybody contributing and having a great time together, I think is kind of the things you remember in the stories that were told, and the camaraderie of the group, and how well you get to know somebody just from 8 days in the wilderness.
Yeah, you definitely get to know people when you're out on those sort of campouts, backpacking, things like that. If people start to, be a little bit lazy and they don't collect as much stuff, or they don't seem to really do anything but use up the resources, it's kind of like, come on, man, like participate a little bit. But then you have the other people who are overzealous and love the chores, and they'll get a ton of firewood because they enjoy it, and they're not like, well, this is my day and I did this. It's just, hey, man, just do your thing, contribute. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, and that's this group was all that way, and it was great. And what else? Highlights, mostly the paddling. The paddling was amazing. The water was moving fast. Moving the canoes on the water was just super fun. Not a ton of wildlife. It was high water, as I mentioned, so I have two theories. The first theory is that hunting season started there August 1st, the second half of the trip. So that pushes stuff back up deeper into the brush. And then second theory is it was high water, so a lot of the gravel bars and sand bars where you would typically see animals hanging out were not there. It was like water pretty much right into the birch and willows. So it was, animals are forced to kind of walk the water's edge deeper into the forest, which makes it tougher to see. So not a ton of wildlife sightings. We saw a lot of signs, though. Some big wolf prints, bear prints, like some small cat type prints, bunch of eagles, all kinds of bald eagles. Yeah.
Nice. So what's next? What's your next big float row canoe trip?
We got one coming up in Moab, Utah, on the Green River through Labyrinth Canyon. That's October 6th through the 10th. That one's going to be a blast. Still, as of now, have a couple spaces open on that one if anybody's interested. It's 4 nights, 5 days, and going to be awesome. It's along with the Yukon, it's on the bucket list of top canoe trips in North America, I think. It's super high, red bluffs and cliffs all around. It's almost like a Mars type atmosphere. It's red desert and feels like you could be on another planet. Have you ever been to Moab area or the Utah desert?
Yeah, I went to Moab, 2 or so years ago. Did some hiking around. What's that city kind of at the mouth of, is it the Virgin River? And then the Virgin River goes up into...
Okay, I'm not sure. I believe you.
Oh, man. Yeah, so I spent a little bit of time in that area, but only once. Only once, but not on the Green River. I have a friend who said there's some pretty good fishing on there. St. George, in the St. George area.
Okay.
Down there. Looking
nice.
At
it's a spectacular area, and this trip in particular, huge, big walls. It's like Grand Canyon-esque, and there's one section called Bonot Bend, which is a famous section where the river kind of does almost a 360 degrees. It's just a couple degrees shy where it goes downriver, and you can hike to the saddle between the two bends and kind of see the river bend back on itself, which is pretty neat.
Cool. I was thinking of Zion. So I was in Zion. So I was incorrect. I've not been to Moab. I've been to Zion. And
similar-ish, but a little different. But yeah, very, very similar. I think Zion has a little more green. Moab is even more red and deserty and dry. And one of the cool things about doing Moab via the river, the Green River, or lots of people do the Colorado as well, but the Green River is, I think it's the best way to do it, because anytime you're backcountry camping in the desert, like, water is the number one concern. So you got to bring it, or you got to hike to a watering hole or somewhere with water. But when you're in a canoe on the river, it's no problemo. There's water everywhere, and it's the place to be in the desert.
Awesome. Yeah. When did you say that was?
That's October 6th.
Nice. Very nice. And if someone wanted to go, where would they go to contact you or look that up?
BuffaloRoamer.com is a good place to start. The trip is listed on there, and then you could also either email me at buffaloroamer@yahoo.com if you have interest, or reach out on maybe Instagram, which is @buffalo_roamer. Any of those would be good.
Awesome. That's actually a pretty good closer right there. You have anything else to add?
I do not, no, other than I'm excited sometime to hear about your caribou hunt and your time up in the Brooks and north of Fairbanks there. Sounds like it was a blast.
That was pretty fun. My buddy and I are going to get together this weekend, do the recap. He came back to work, and as a teacher, I don't have work, so I'm just trying to write as much stuff as I can during the time that I have here. Then I got to head back up the mountains for some deer hunting. So I'm busy, but in a non-work sort of way. So we're gonna lay down the recap and probably get that out next week.
Thanks for having me on. And yeah, don't forget Buffalo Roamer podcast. Subscribe. Check out that one. There's episodes twice a month that drop. You can find it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any of that fun stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff.
See you.